12 names, 12 executives who didn't just sign artists, they own them. You know the albums, you know the hits, but you don't know who was pulling the strings behind closed doors. The labels, the managers, the contracts that turn multi-platinum artists into modern-day sharecroppers. Some of these names you've heard whispered about for decades. Others stayed in the shadows while the artists they controlled took all the heat. This isn't about music. This is about the men who built empires on other people's talent. And made sure those people never saw what they were owed. Let's talk about the real puppet masters. Number 12, the architect, Irving Azoff. If you don't know the name, that's exactly how he wanted it. Azoff wasn't some street dude turned music mogul. He came up in the corporate world. Management, publishing, concert promotion. By the time hip-hop exploded, he'd already figured out every way to extract money from an artist without them even noticing. He managed the Eagles. He ran N.W.A. Records. He had his hands in everything. And when he started working with hip-hop acts through Live Nation and Frontline Management, he brought that same extraction playbook. Here's what most people don't understand about managers like Azoff. They don't just take a percentage. They structure deals where they control your touring, your merchandising, your sponsorships, your publishing. They become the gatekeeper between you and your money. And if you try to leave, the contracts are written so tight that you're paying them even after you're gone. Azoff pioneered the 360 deal structure before it even had a name. He'd sign an artist, then put them in a system where every dollar they made, every single revenue stream, flowed through him first, and artists would see their share months later. Sometimes years later, after expenses got deducted. Studio time, marketing, tour support. Suddenly that $1 million deal turned into $50,000 in your pocket. And here's the part that'll make you sick. Azoff wasn't even in the room most of the time. He had lawyers, accountants, business affairs people who did the dirty work while he collected checks and shook hands with other executives. He was the blueprint for every modern-day puppet master who figured out you don't need to threaten people. You just need to own the paperwork. By the time an artist realized what happened, they'd already signed away their leverage. And Azoff, he moved on to the next act. Number 11, the family man, Matthew Knowles. He's known for Destiny's Child, but this ain't about Beyonce's success. This is about how her father ran Music World Entertainment like a family business where he controlled every decision. Knowles managed his daughter from the beginning. That's not unusual. But here's where it gets complicated. He structured deals where he wasn't just the manager. He was the label head, the publisher, and the executive producer. That's 3 separate revenue streams, all controlled by one person. And when your family questioning the business feels like questioning loyalty. Former Destiny's Child members LaToya Luckett and Latavia Robertson got pushed out in 2000. They sued, claiming Knowles and his companies withheld royalties and profits. The group had sold millions of records by then, multi-platinum. But when you're signed to someone who controls the paperwork, millions sold doesn't always mean millions paid. And here's what makes the Knowles situation different from other puppet masters. He wasn't some outside executive exploiting strangers. This was family, which meant the control went deeper than contracts. It was wrapped in trust, in legacy, in we're building this together. And that's harder to walk away from than a label deal. Knowles eventually got removed as Beyoncé's manager in 2011. Reports said it was amicable, but you don't fire your father as your manager because everything's perfect. You do it because the business got too tangled with the personal. And by then, the damage to other artists under Music World Entertainment had already been done. Matthew Knowles built a machine, but the people inside that machine, they didn't all walk away whole. If you made it this far, you already know. You're not here for the algorithm highlights and TikTok clips. You're here for the real story. Here's what's crazy. 96% of people watching right now won't subscribe. They'll get the knowledge, then YouTube will bury us in their feed forever, which means when we drop that upcoming video, you'll never see it. Look, hip-hop radio ain't for everybody, but if you're still here, it's definitely for you. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. Real recognize real. Number 10, the innovator, Antonio L.A. Reid. Co-founder of LaFace Records, the man who helped break Outkast, TLC, Usher, and Goody Mob. And on paper, he looks like one of the good guys. But let's talk about what happened when you actually signed to LaFace. Reid launched LaFace with Babyface in 1989, backed by Arista Records and Clive Davis. And at first it worked. Artists got developed, hits got made, but the financial structure was brutal. LaFace wasn't just a label, it was a subsidiary under a subsidiary, which meant every dollar an artist made got split 3 ways before it even reached them. Arista took their cut, LaFace took their cut, and then the artist got what was left. After recoupable expenses, of course. TLC is the most famous example. They sold 11 million copies of Crazy Sexy Cool in 1994. That album is still one of the best-selling records of all time, and each member of TLC made about $50,000 a year during that period. Not per show, per year, because their manager Pebbles had them signed to multiple deals. Management, production, publishing, and LaFace's contract with Arista meant the money got chopped up before it ever reached the artist. TLC filed for bankruptcy in 1995 while their album was still selling. You can't make this up. Reid would later say the real problem was the parent label, that Arista and BMG were the bottleneck, and maybe he's right, but here's the thing. Reid was the one who structured those deals. He knew how the money flowed. He knew what artists were making, and he kept signing people under the same system. By the time Reid left LaFace and moved to other executive positions, Arista, Island Def Jam, Epic Records, he'd built a legacy as a hitmaker. But the artists who built that legacy, some of them never recovered financially, and that's the cost of innovation when the innovator forgets who's actually making the music. Number 9, The Protector, James J. Prince Smith. Founder of Rap-A-Lot Records. And this one's complicated because J. Prince isn't your typical puppet master. He built careers. He protected artists. He went to war for his people. But control is still control, even when it comes wrapped in loyalty. Some got killed in the past, but this gangster here was a J. Prince came up in Houston's 5th Ward running a used car lot before he launched Rap-A-Lot in 1986. He signed the Ghetto Boys, Scarface, Devin the Dude, Bun B, Zero. He built the blueprint for Southern independent hip-hop. And unlike a lot of executives, Prince actually understood the streets. He had juice. real juice, the kind that made people think twice before they came at his artists sideways. But here's where the protection becomes control. Prince had a reputation.
When the fire dies down, what the fuck you gonna do? Damn, it feels good to be again.
And that reputation meant people were scared to cross him, which is great if you're on his side, but if you're an artist trying to leave Rap-A-Lot, that's a different story. Scarface, his flagship artist, the guy who put Rap-A-Lot on the map, eventually spoke out. He said Prince released 4 albums under his name without his approval. Albums made from outtakes and cut material that Scarface never intended to put out. He called it disrespectful. And when your own star says you didn't care about the artist, just the business, that's a problem. Other Rap-A-Lot artists sued for unpaid royalties, too low, others whose names never made headlines. And while Prince always defended himself, saying he took care of his people, the pattern kept repeating. Artists would blow up, make hits, then quietly leave or fade away.
Feels good to be a gangster, feeding the poor and helping out with their bills.
Talking about money that never came through. And then there's the street side. The DEA investigated Prince in the 90s, thinking Rap-A-Lot was a front for something bigger. They never proved anything. But the investigation itself showed how deep Prince's influence ran.
Partners in the posse ain't telling off shit. Real gangsta ass niggas don't.
He wasn't just a label head, he was a power broker. And when you're that connected, artists don't just leave and they have to get permission. J. Prince protected his artists from the outside world, but inside Rap-A-Lot, that protection came with strings attached, and those strings were hard to cut. Number 8, the contract specialist, Perry Pebbles, Reid, R&B singer turned manager, and the woman who turned TLC into superstars and then made sure they stayed broke while doing it. Pebbles was married to L.A. Reid when she started managing TLC in 1991. She didn't just manage them, she signed them to Pebbles, her production and management company. And Pebbles had deals with LaFace Records, which had deals with Arista Records. 3 layers of contracts, 3 different entities taking cuts, and every single one of them controlled by people TLC trusted. Here's how it worked. TLC would record an album. LaFace would charge them for studio time, marketing, music videos, travel, wardrobe, food. Everything was recoupable, meaning the label would take it out of the artist's share before they got paid. But LaFace's deal with Arista meant the money was already getting split before it even hit LaFace's books. So by the time TLC saw a check, most of the money was gone. In Pebbles, she was taking a management fee, a production fee, and a publishing cut, on top of everything LaFace was already taking. Which meant TLC was working for multiple bosses, and every boss had their hand out. The group sold 11 million copies of Crazy Sexy Cool. They were everywhere, MTV, radio, award shows, and each member was making about $50,000 a year. That's less than a mid-level office job for one of the biggest groups in the world. When TLC sued Pebbles and LaFace in 1994, the details came out. They weren't just broke, they were in debt to their own label, to their own manager. And when they tried to get out, Pebbles controlled the one thing they couldn't replace, their name. TLC eventually had to pay Pebbles $3 million, $1 million per letter, just to buy back the rights to call themselves TLC. Pebbles later sued over how she was portrayed in the TLC biopic. She said she wasn't the villain, that the real problem was the parent labels. But here's the thing, she signed those deals, she knew the structure, and she made sure her cut was protected while the artist she managed went bankrupt. That's not management, that's extraction, and TLC paid the price. Number 7, The East Coast King, Sean Diddy Combs. Bad Boy Records. And before you say, but he gave artists opportunities, let's talk about what those opportunities actually cost. Diddy launched Bad Boy in 1993 with Biggie Smalls as his flagship. By the late 90s, he had Mase, 112s, Faith Evans, The Lox, and a roster that dominated East Coast hip-hop. And on the surface, it looked like he was building something different. Artists got promoted, videos got made, tours happened. That's what we do. But behind the scenes, the contracts were classic industry exploitation dressed up in Sean John suits. Mase spoke out about it years later, said he sold his publishing to Diddy for $20,000 when he signed to Bad Boy in 1996. $20,000 for the rights to songs that made millions. And when Mase tried to buy it back years later, Diddy wanted $2 million, 100 times what he paid for it. When Mase wanted to leave Bad Boy and sign with 50 Cent's G-Unit in 2005, Diddy blocked it unless 50 paid him $2 million to release Mase from his contract. That's not a partnership, that's ownership. The Lox went through the same thing. They wanted off Bad Boy, but Diddy wouldn't let them go without paying him first. They had to stage a public campaign just to get out of their deal. And even after they left, Bad Boy still controlled their masters. Still made money off their old work, still owned a piece of what they built. Mark Curry, Carl Thomas, other Bad Boy artists who never blew up the way Biggie or Mase did. They all tell similar stories, promises made, advances given, but royalties that never came. Accounting that didn't add up, and contracts that kept them tied to Bad Boy even after the hit stopped. Diddy eventually returned publishing rights to some Bad Boy artists in 2023. Mase got his back, so did Faith Evans and The Lox, and people applauded it like he was doing something noble. But here's the reality. He held those rights for decades, made money off them for decades, and only gave them back after years of public pressure and accusations of hypocrisy. That's not generosity, that's damage control. And the thing about Diddy is he always played both sides. He'd talk about black excellence and building wealth in the community while his own artists were saying he exploited them. He'd call out the Grammys for not respecting black music while Mase was calling him out for the same thing. The puppet master who convinced everyone he was the artist. Number 6, the silent partner, Jerry Heller. N.W.A.'s manager, Roulette Records co-founder, and the man who Ice Cube called out on No Vaseline for stealing from the group while pretending to be family. Heller met Eazy-E in 1987 when Eazy was trying to launch Roulette Records. Heller had industry experience, connections, knowledge about how to navigate distribution deals and get records into stores, and Eazy needed that. So they partnered up. Eazy owned 80%, Heller took 20%. But ownership percentages don't mean much when one person controls all the business decisions. By 1989, N.W.A. was blowing up. Straight Outta Compton was everywhere. The FBI was writing letters. The group was controversial and profitable, but when Ice Cube asked to see the books, Heller and Eazy offered him a contract with a $75,000 signing bonus and no transparency about where the real money was going. Cube had made about $32,000 total at that point. For one of the most important albums in hip-hop history. And Heller expected him to sign a new deal without even showing him the accounting. Cube walked, left N.W.A. in January 1990, and then he started making solo records where he detailed exactly what happened. Heller's response? He said Cube didn't understand business, that the contracts were standard, that he wasn't stealing, just managing. Dr. Dre left Ruthless in 1991 under similar circumstances. He felt exploited, and the way he got out? Suge Knight allegedly showed up at Heller's office with some people and convinced Easy to release Dre from his contract. Whether it happened exactly like that is debated, but the fact that it took intimidation to get out of a Ruthless contract tells you everything about how those deals were structured. Heller spent the rest of his life defending his reputation. He wrote a book. He sued over Straight Outta Compton, the movie. He insisted he was fair and that the artists just didn't understand the business side. But here's the problem. When every major artist on your label leaves and says you robbed them, maybe the problem isn't their understanding, maybe it's your contracts. Eazy-E allegedly fired Heller right before he died in 1995, and that's the part people forget. Even the guy who brought Heller in eventually saw through it, but by then, the damage was done. N.W.A. broke up, Ruthless fell apart, and Heller walked away with his 20%, while the artists who made the music spent years trying to reclaim what they built. Number 5, The Businessman, Brian Birdman Williams. Cash Money Records, and the man who turned I'm Getting You Paid into the longest running lie in hip-hop history. Birdman and his brother Slim launched Cash Money in 1991 in New Orleans. By 1998, they had a $100 million distribution deal with Universal, and that deal made them legends. They kept 80% of their revenue, they owned their masters, they built an empire, but here's what nobody talks about. While Birdman was getting rich, his artists stayed broke. The first wave of Cash Money artists all left. Lil Slim, UNLV, Soulja Slim, all of them cited the same reason. Non-payment, they sold records, played shows, and never saw the money they were owed. Birdman's response? He blamed drugs, said they were unprofessional, but when every artist from that era tells the same story, that's not coincidence, that's a system. Manny Fresh, Cash Money's in-house producer, left in 2005. The man behind Bling Bling and most of Cash Money's biggest hits, he said it was about money, about getting what he was owed. And then there's Lil Wayne, the one who stayed, the one Birdman called his son. In 2014, Wayne sued Cash Money for $51 million in unpaid royalties and advances. No, I wouldn't take your girl, but I shall take her. And this wasn't some new artist getting jerked on their first deal. This was Wayne, the biggest artist Cash Money ever had. And even he couldn't get paid. The lawsuit detailed how Birdman withheld money, how he blocked the release of Thought Carter 5. How he controlled Young Money's finances and refused to pay Drake and Nicki Minaj their share of the profits. And when Wayne tried to leave, Birdman allegedly had people shoot up his tour bus in 2015. That's how far the control went. Not just contract, physical threats. Birdman claimed Wayne owed him $3 million, that he'd given advances Wayne never delivered on, and maybe some of that's true. But here's the reality. Dozens of artists, dozens of producers, all saying the same thing. Birdman is still rich, still powerful, still respected in some circles, but his empire was built on a simple formula: sign artists young, make them famous, take everything and dare them to leave, and most of them couldn't. Number 4, the empire builder, Marion Suge Knight. Death Row Records, and the most dangerous puppet master in hip-hop history, because Suge didn't just control artists with contracts, he controlled them with fear. Suge co-founded Death Row in 1991 with Dr. Dre and the D.O.C. Within 2 years, they had The Chronic and Doggy Style, back-to-back multi-platinum albums that defined West Coast hip-hop, and Suge positioned himself as the protector, the guy who got artists out of bad deals, the guy who stood up to labels and made sure his people got paid. But that's not how it actually worked. Dre left Death Row in 1996, and it wasn't because things were going great. Dre said he was tired of the violence, tired of Suge control, tired of watching gang members and yes men run the studio while Suge made all the decisions. And when Dre left, Suge didn't just let him go. He spent years dissing him publicly on records, like he owned Dre's legacy. Snoop Dogg left in 1998, and years later he explained it. Suge controlled everything. The money was in his name. He gave you what he felt you should have. Snoop sold millions of records for Death Row. Suge decided what he got paid. Not contracts, not accounting. And then there's Tupac. Suge bailed him out of prison in 1995 for $1.4 million, but that bail came with strings. Pac signed to Death Row, gave up 3 albums, gave up control, and when Suge bails you out of prison, you're indebted. The violence at Death Row wasn't just about gang culture, it was about control. Suge used intimidation to keep people in line. Artists got beaten in meetings for working with the wrong producers. Producers got blackballed for asking about money. And everyone knew, cross Suge, and there's consequences. Daz Dillinger sued Death Row in 2001. He said Suge coerced him into signing revised contracts in 1997 and 1998 under threats. No audit, no lawyers, just sign or deal with the repercussions. I got a pit named P, she niggerina. I got a house out in the heat. Suge eventually lost Death Row, filed for bankruptcy in 2006, got sentenced to 28 years in prison for voluntary manslaughter in 2018, and now people talk about him like a relic, like the era's over. But the model he built, sign artists, control everything, use fear as leverage, that didn't die with Death Row. It just went underground, got smarter, learned how to hide behind LLCs and legal language instead of showing up with muscle. Suge built the most successful independent hip-hop label of the 90s, and it cost almost everyone who worked there a piece of their soul. Number 3, the architect, Jimmy Iovine in Interscope Records. The white executive who made hundreds of millions off hip-hop while positioning himself as the culture's ally. Iovine launched Interscope in 1990 with Ted Field, and from the beginning, he understood something most major labels didn't. Hip-hop was about to explode, and if you wanted to capitalize, you didn't sign artists directly. You partnered with independent labels who already had the talent, then took a cut of everything they made. That's the Interscope model, and it's how Iovine built his empire without ever getting his hands dirty. Death Row, Aftermath, Shady Records, Murder Inc. G-Unit. All of them had distribution deals with Interscope, which meant Interscope took a percentage of every album sold, every single downloaded, every stream. And they did it while letting the label heads take the blame when artists complained about money. Iovine's genius was staying in the background. He wasn't the one in the studio. He wasn't the one in the meetings with artists. He had Suge Knight for Death Row, Dr. Dre for Aftermath, Eminem and 50 Cent for Shady and G-Unit. They were the faces, but Interscope owned the infrastructure. And when artists like Tupac or Snoop or 50 Cent sold millions of records, Interscope's cut came first, before the artist, before the label, before anyone. The partnership with Death Row is the perfect example. Death Row made over $100 million a year at its peak, but Interscope had a deal where they owned a piece of everything. And when Death Row imploded, when Suge went to prison and the artists left, Interscope still owned the masters, still profited off music they didn't create. And Iovine positioned himself as the good guy, the one who believed in artists, the one who gave Dr. Dre a chance when no one else would. But belief doesn't mean equity. Iovine sold Beats to Apple in 2014 for $3 billion. That's his payout. The artists who made the music that funded his empire, most of them are still fighting for royalties. Here's the thing about Iovine. He wasn't violent like Suge. He wasn't hands-on like Birdman. He didn't have to be. He built a system where the money flowed up, and the artists never saw the full picture. And by the time they figured it out, the contracts were signed, the music was made, and Interscope already owned the masters. Jimmy Iovine changed the music industry, but the people who created the music that paid for that change, they're still waiting for their fair share. Number 2, the mogul, Clive Davis and Arista Records. The man who pioneered the corporate control of black music before hip-hop even existed. Davis ran Columbia Records in the 60s and 70s, launched Arista in 1974, and by the time hip-hop became profitable, he'd already perfected the model. Sign talented artists, give them just enough support to make hits, then structure the deal so the label owns everything and the artist gets a fraction. Davis brought LaFace Records under the Arista umbrella in 1989. That's where TLC, Outkast, Usher, and Goody Mob were signed. And while L.A. Reid and Babyface got credit for developing those artists, Arista controlled the money. LaFace had a deal where Arista funded the label, handled distribution, and took a percentage off the top, which meant every dollar TLC made got split between LaFace and Arista before it reached them. And Davis made sure Arista's cut was protected. When TLC filed for bankruptcy in 1995, people blamed Pebbles. They blamed LaFace, but Arista was the parent company. Arista had the final say on budgets, on recoupable expenses, on how much artists got paid. And Davis never had to answer for it because he was 3 steps removed from the artists themselves. Davis also controlled Whitney Houston's career. Not hip-hop, but the same model. Houston was one of the biggest artists in the world, sold over 200 million records. And when she died in 2012, her estate was worth a fraction of what it should have been because Arista owned her masters, controlled her publishing, took the majority of the revenue while she was alive and continued profiting after she was gone. The thing about Clive Davis is he's untouchable. He's been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame twice. He's got a Grammy named after him. He's celebrated as a visionary, and maybe he is. But visions aren't free. And the cost of Davis's vision was paid by artists who trusted him to look out for their best interests while he prioritized the label's profit margins. Davis is 92 years old now, still respected, still wealthy. Still lauded as one of the greatest executives in music history. But ask TLC, ask Whitney Houston's estate, ask any artist who signed to Arista and expected to see the money their music generated, and they'll tell you the same thing. Clive Davis built his legacy on the backs of artists who never got what they were owed. Number 1, the original, Morris Levy and the Mob. This is where it all started, Roulette Records, and the mob-connected executive who created the blueprint every puppet master in hip-hop would eventually follow. Morris Levy didn't invent exploitation in the music industry, but he perfected it. He ran Roulette Records from the 1950s through the 80s, and Roulette wasn't just a record label, it was a front. Morris Levy. He had ties to the Genovese crime family. And he used those connections to control artists, steal publishing rights, and threaten anyone who tried to fight back. His favorite tactic was simple. He'd sign artists to terrible deals, take ownership of their publishing without them even realizing it. Then when the artist tried to leave or renegotiate, he'd threaten them. Not with lawsuits, with violence. Artists who crossed Levy disappeared from the industry. Some disappeared completely. Tommy James of Tommy James and the Shondells is the most famous example. James signed to Roulette in the 60s. It had massive hits like Crimson and Clover. And I Think We're Alone Now. And Levy took everything. Publishing, masters, profits. James eventually wrote a book about it, said Levy would show up to meetings with armed men, that he made it clear what would happen if James tried to leave or sue. By the time hip-hop emerged in the late 70s and early 80s, Levy was already old school, but his model lived on. The idea that an executive could control an artist through contracts, intimidation, and financial manipulation didn't start with Suge Knight or Birdman. It started with Morris Levy. He's the reason labels learned they could take publishing without asking. He's the reason contracts got written to favor the label over the artist. He's the reason executives realized that control wasn't just about owning the music, it was about owning the person. Levy eventually got caught, convicted of extortion in 1988, but by then, he'd been doing it for 30 years. Generations of artists got destroyed in that time. And the worst part, nobody in hip-hop talks about him. Because most people don't even know the name, but every puppet master who came after him learned from his playbook. And here's the thing, Levy's dead, but the system he built is still here. It just looks different now. LLCs instead of mob ties, lawyers instead of muscle. But the goal is the same. Control the artist, own the work, take everything, and make sure the puppet never sees the strings.